And today I wanted to share some of the kind of hard-won lessons I've learned actually trying to use OKRs for real in 2 publicly listed organizations and 1 startup, both here in Australia and in Germany, in Berlin. Today I'll cover the very basics of what are OKRs, the what and the why of why organizations adopt them. I'll share 4 of the biggest mistakes I've made in adopting them for the first time at scale. And because, as John said, it's much more fun to learn by doing, we'll take some time out to practice writing some OKRs together. I'll also cover 4 tips for introducing OKRs and adopting them in an organization. And lastly, a bit of a quick start in terms of how to get started, where to learn more, and really how to get started the right way. So that's what we've got today. Feel free to put questions in the chat, and John or Craig, feel free to funnel those through at an appropriate time. Before we get much further, let's actually introduce OKRs with an example. Here you can see an OKR next to me. It basically has an objective and a key result. The objective in this example is literally save the world from the climate disaster. And the key result for that is something like reducing net carbon emissions from 36 billion tonnes to 0 tonnes by 2050. That's what we mean by net zero. I've also added a section for activities that show how we hope to achieve that goal. In this case, adopting renewable energy, using renewable energy to power transport, housing, and manufacturing. So on the surface, OKRs appears to be a really simple, even simplistic way to set a goal and to measure your progress. However, I've found the real world application, especially at any scale, is where all the real fun and games are. The first time I used OKRs was back in 2017, in the before times. I was in Berlin, Germany, and I got to work with Greg Ellis and Rich Donnell again for this time at Germany's biggest property and car portal, the Scout24 group. That org was about 1,200 people in total, publicly listed, and they were split across Berlin and Munich. Property was mostly in Berlin and cars were mostly in Munich. Most of Scout had never heard of OKRs, especially outside of tech. So the question is, why did they want to use them? Why did they adopt them? And before I answer that question, I'd love to know what challenges you've faced in your organizations with goal setting. So Craig, if you're able to throw up a poll, we've prepared a little poll for you, and you can choose multiple answers. I just want you to check the ones that maybe your top 3 reasons or challenges that you've seen in your organization or teams in terms of goal setting. So the options are unclear strategy, maybe a lack of focus or doing too many things, maybe a lack of alignment or operating in silos or not working across functions, maybe not achieving your strategic goals, maybe lack of alignment between areas, lack of engagement, as in unhappy staff or cultural issues, maybe lack of accountability, a sense of that no one's in charge of achieving something or measuring whether they're succeeding it or not, or maybe a lack of ambition. Maybe people are just playing it too safe, or maybe you have a challenge which is different. I'd love to hear what that is. Please put that in chat now if I didn't manage to capture, at least at a high level, what your major challenges you see are. So just give you a second for that. 16 people, we're up to 72%. Just give you a second to answer that poll if you haven't already. It's single choice. Sorry, yeah, I meant to make it multiple choice, but you're going to have to pick your number 1 issue. So yeah, obviously a number of them probably apply. We'll fix that one up next time. Yeah, a lot of people are writing in chat. Actually, I have a few. Okay, we'll move on. If you haven't voted, that's okay. So if we can close the poll and have a look at the results, it looks like the number 1 reason that people are challenged by goal setting is a lack of focus, maybe doing too many things. And the second most was lack of alignment, operating in silos. And just like all good magicians, that's exactly what I've experienced as well. When I work with clients, there's been 3 big areas that particularly the exec teams have been looking to improve with OKRs. And those are focus, alignment, and a lack of achievement. So close that poll so it doesn't keep stealing the focus. Okay, the exec teams I've worked with often have a sense that the organization is producing lots of output, everyone is really busy, but they're not having the expected impact on the market. They want to increase impact without maybe increasing investment. Typically, clients are saying they have many competing priorities for capacity, and often this can get completely out of control. Usually there's this strong sense of juggling too many initiatives across the organization. Here in Australia, I worked with an organization to conduct interviews and surveys to do analysis of what challenges they had with their goal setting. And they determined that the #1 opportunity for improvement across their organization was focus. The second biggest opportunity, just like in the poll today, I've seen across many clients is alignment. So we did employee engagement surveys at Scout, and many of the staff felt disconnected from the strategy and purpose, which was that first option in the poll. We were looking to OKRs to somehow improve our communication and transparency of the company's goals. Again, in these interviews and feedbacks in Australia, the client identified that cross-functional alignment, particularly across sales, marketing, and product, was a huge opportunity for improvement. These functions were often working at cross purposes to each other with competing priorities. And finally, I see many clients seeking to increase the ambition in their organization, looking to inspire and engage their teams through meaningful and purposeful work. And a key benefit many organizations are seeking with OKRs is to increase employee engagement while also actually achieving some strategic objectives. So in late 2017, I'm minding my own business. I'm just 3 months into living in Germany for the first time. I'm in my role at Scout doing a project rescue when Rich, the CTO, says to me kind of casually, hey, maybe we should try OKRs. Perhaps you could work on that. At the time, I had no experience with OKRs, and the largest change I'd ever managed was introducing agile methods across a department of 300 people back then. Suffice it to say, mistakes were made. And that's kind of what I want to share with you today. Some of the 4 biggest lessons, maybe opportunities for growth I went through along the way to implementing OKRs across 1,200 people. Our first attempt with OKRs was when Rich, our CTO, wrote his first set of OKRs for the tech function for the whole year, and he presented them to his tech leaders as a first draft for discussion. Shortly after that, not to be outdone, Thomas, the Chief Product Officer, did the same for the product function. I thought, hey, this is great. Early executive support. This is bound to be a winner. And they're leading by example. This, unfortunately, turns out was not such a good start to my OKR journey. A massive learning from this kind of setup. It actually took us 2 cycles, Q1 and Q2 in 2018, to quite clock this, was that having these separate OKRs for the tech and product function was a huge mistake. We were passing down problems of focus and alignment into the organization. You can just imagine the 2 sets of tech and product OKRs cascaded down through the teams until the conflict was sitting in every team between product and tech. With the tech function being told, your #1 priority is to improve resilience, and the product function being told, your #1 priority is to create this new opportunity in a new market. It wasn't ideal. This did not solve many of the problems we were looking for, and it wasn't fixing focus for us at all. So we decided to try something different. We proposed to the executive team that they had to create a single set of joint shared OKRs across all the key functions: product, tech, sales, finance. This was the idea of cross-functional OKRs rather than individual or functional OKRs. And this is a lot more difficult than you would expect. We went through rounds and rounds of PowerPoint, ended up with huge numbers of objectives, way more OKRs than we wanted. And Rich said that his experience of working with that exec team to try to cut down the OKRs to just the few key things that matter was, in his words, brutal. It required a brutal focus to take hundreds or tens of key results and get them down to just 2 or 3 that really mattered. But these cross-functional OKRs were a big improvement. The arguments about tech versus product didn't magically disappear, but they started earlier at the ELT level. And it helped highlight some hidden trade-offs that we maybe hadn't really noticed. I like to say that if you're having arguments, then OKRs are working. That OKRs, like agile methods, aren't really going to solve your alignment problems, but they are going to make them a bit more obvious, and you might find that useful. So that's my first tip today. Avoid these individual OKRs and try cross-functional OKRs. We thought cross-functional OKRs was such a good idea, we would do it everywhere. We're going to cascade this pattern to every level in the organization. Let's do it across the company, vertical, market segment, and team levels. This will be great, I thought. And maybe this was my second big mistake. An advantage of this idea was that we did show up differences of opinion and priority between, let's say, the exec team and maybe a VP, or between the VP and a head of. It became kind of clear, though, that the vertical alignment was an issue, and reviewing these OKRs allowed some important decisions to be made. But it was too much of a good thing. It turned out that 4 levels of OKRs becomes really complex, really quickly, almost a completely unwieldy set of interconnected layers. And it's not recommended by the experts. But it took us months to realize this, to get OKRs written and then aligned across just the first 3 layers. Christina Vodka is one of my favorite OKR authors. Her book is in its 2nd edition now, Radical Focus. As she says in that book, don't cascade your OKRs, keep it simple. Try to start with just 2 levels, company and team. And that's what I recommend clients do these days. Try to keep it as simple as possible. If you do need department OKRs, maybe introduce them later, but try to keep your OKR adoption as simple as possible. So that's my second tip. Avoid getting really excited, overexcited about OKRs and cascading them everywhere. Instead, keep it simple. Try company and team. So looking at my first OKR and my boss's first OKR, it kind of read a bit like a roadmap or a to-do list. A quick way to tell your key results or our activities is to look at the verb. Words like complete, build, design, launch, all these words point to one thing: we're doing the work. And the problem with these activity style key results is they don't really tell you if you're achieving a goal. They just measure maybe your output, not your outcome. It would be possible to complete this list of all the work and still not know if we've had any impact or the impact that we were hoping for. So this moving from output to outcome thinking is a really significant part of doing OKRs well, but it is a difficult shift to make. One way to make that shift easier is to add a third part to your OKRs, to explicitly separate output, things like initiatives, milestones, activities, projects, to separate them from your outcome. And I call this style of OKR, OKRA, OKRs, objectives, key results, and activities. You can think of these 3 parts as the why, the what, and the how, or maybe your purpose, your outcome, and your output. So OKRs offer an important tool in your leadership toolbox, and it can help you motivate a team by providing a sense of purpose, the why, while still giving autonomy and freedom to pursue mastery. If you haven't seen Dan Pink's famous Autonomy, Mastery, Purpose video for a wonderful overview of these 3 drivers of team performance, check out the YouTube. If you Google Autonomy, Mastery, Purpose, it will land you on that YouTube video. And maybe someone could share the link in chat if they found it. So one way that this separating of outcomes from output supports you as a leader is in an intent-based leadership style. You want to separate the outcome from the output, the what from the how. And you can use objectives and key results by actually maybe providing clarity on the why and the what, while delegating some or all of the ownership of the activities, or even leading indicators, delegating the how. So that was a big mistake of ours. When we started, all of our OKRs were basically to-do lists full of activities. So instead, try this idea of OKRs and split out your activities from your outcomes.
One of the classic mistakes I made is to set my objectives at the start of a quarter and not look at them again till the beginning of the next quarter. And just, this is like something I think everyone does. They spend all their time trying to set the OKRs, but that's it. They kind of stop there. I really like how Felipe Castro introduced to us a view of an end-to-end OKR cycle that's more than just setting your OKR. It's also aligning and achieving and reflecting. I think this is a useful reminder that there's a lot more to OKRs than just setting and forgetting. As Felipe says, don't treat your OKRs like New Year's resolutions. Instead, do the work of living your OKRs in daily work through the achievement process. To really nail the achievement of OKRs, I recommend the 4 disciplines of execution as a companion framework for OKRs. It's particularly useful for creating a cadence of accountability around a compelling scoreboard and adds focus and leading indicators to the mix. If you have tried OKRs before and you didn't get the impact you expected, try combining them with 4DX to give you the focus and cadence to make them part of your day-to-day work, not just something you did 3 months ago. So these are my 4 mistakes and the suggestions for improving them. We tried individual OKRs, that didn't work. We tried cascading OKRs, it was a complete mess. We tried lots of to-do lists and didn't really tell us if we're achieving our outcome. And we set and forgetted. So we needed the 4 disciplines of execution. So don't do what I did. Instead, try the things that worked the second time round or the third time round. It's worth pointing out that doing all this well takes a lot of time and effort. It took over 2 years for most of my large clients to get competent OKRs across thousands of people. So let's practice. Enough talking, let's start some doing. I thought we might use the next few minutes actually practicing writing some OKRs. So grab my Canvas from canvas.freshwater Academy. Basically grab a copy of my OKR cheat sheet. We'll use this Canvas in a moment to practice writing our OKRs together. So I'll let you go grab that now. If you've got, you want someone paste the link in, I can paste it here. Basically, yeah, click on that link, it'll email it to you. And while you're doing that, I'll take you through the checklist for what makes a good OKR. And then I'll take you through a mechanism for starting writing them, and it'll be over to you to write them. Firstly, the checklist includes tips for objectives. The objective explains the purpose or the why of your goal, and they're often articulated as the ultimate destination or outcome. For example, land a person on the moon. That's a great objective. Save the world. That's a great objective. You want these objectives to be ambitious, engaging, and inspiring. To make them memorable, they need to be kept short, only a few words. And if you want to avoid, you probably want to avoid numbers, jargon, or corporate speak. The test of a good objective is, would you wear it if we printed it on a t-shirt? The second bucket is your key results. These are what the specific outcomes are you want to measure. They tell you if you're making progress towards your objective. There's a recommended template for key results. It is increase or decrease a metric from X to Y by when. So key results must have a metric, a number, and they should be a result, a measure of an outcome, not an output. They should include the current and target values of the metric X and Y, and they should include a time frame. For example, by the end of this quarter, end of Q3, end of Q4. And the third bucket in the cheat sheet is activities. This is the place to put the how. These are the activities, initiatives, outputs, and milestones your team is planning to achieve the objective and the key results. Basically, when we successfully complete all our activities, we're hoping that that has some kind of outcome. And that's what we measure in the key results. So one quick way to get started today is for us to work backwards. This is a sort of a quick start method. It's not the only way to start writing OKRs, but it's really fast. And I thought you could do it today in 5 minutes or less. So what I want you to do is think about what is my most important project or activity for the next 3 months, Q1, financial year, Q1, FY22.
It could be your most important project your team is working on. It could be your most important, largest, most significant use of your time. Have a think about your context. What is your most important initiative right now? Write it in the canvas in the activities column. So if you've got the canvas, got it open in Google Slides, just jot down your notes of what you think your most important initiative is, or top 2, maybe top 3. But I'm really interested in what's your most important initiative right now. I'll give you a second to do that.
So Ben, we just put that in as the heading, or are you saying under activities?
In the activities box. So if you go down to slide 3 or 4, you should find a blank slide that allows you just to type in the answer to this, which is whatever the most important project I'm working on is. Put that in your activities box, yeah? We're working backwards from activities to key result. So now we can use Philippe Castro's conversion method to convert our activity into a key result. Basically, we have to convert it into an outcome. To do this, imagine the 3 months have passed. Let's time travel into the future. It's 3 months from today, and our project or our initiative was wildly, massively, crazily successful. It was more successful than we could possibly have imagined. What is the outcome or impact that would have had in the world? Let's say your amazing project was way more successful than you could ever have hoped for. What would that look like? How would that show up? How might you measure that? So think about that for a moment. How might you measure a massive success in your initiative or your project? How would you measure how successful it was? Like a little bit or a lot? Something that you can measure.
So we put, say,
okay, now try writing some ideas in for that set of things you could measure in the key results box. Does that make sense? So there could be lots of ideas. Often I'd suggest brainstorming many of them.
Okay. So Ben, do we put a couple in there or just 1 or 2?
As many as you want. You're just brainstorming at this point. You're trying to think about how could I measure the success of that initiative. Remember, it should be an outcome or an impact, not activity. Don't measure like how many things you did or that you did something. Measure the outcome, the impact on the world, a change in a customer's behavior, a change in a person's behavior, that kind of thing.
Ben, do you have a guidance on what is the best practice for the time frame? The one thing I always hear from people is when they do these, and I've often heard 3 months at a team level, maybe a year at a company level. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I often see company OKRs are often for 12 months lined up with their annual planning process, and team OKRs are very often quarterly, lined up with their existing quarterly planning processes. Having said that, at Scout Group, we had 4-month cycles. So we had 3 of them a year, and that shifted our dates of our OKRs away from the massive holidays in Europe. So try doing a planning activity in the middle of summer holidays and in the middle of Christmas holidays, and you'll understand why you may not want quarter boundaries if you're flexible enough. So I quite like 4-month cycles for large corporates with weird holiday periods. So yeah, your mileage may vary. You could make them smaller as well, because the idea of OKRs is goal setting and measurement. It's theoretically possible you could use them as a sprint goal and have a different goal every month if you wanted to really like tighten up that feedback loop. So now write your outcome as a key result. Use the placeholders X and Y so you don't have to come up with what is the value now and what is the value in 3 months' time. There's a template provided in the deck to make that easier. And now repeat this step for any other activities that you came up with that you were like, oh yeah, this is also another important activity. What's the measurement to measure that outcome? Okay, finally, step 3 is to try to come up with an objective. This is actually kind of hard. It's a bit like being a marketing person because you're trying to come up with something that inspires this work, answers the question, why are we doing this? Why do we care? And describes the destination of a significant milestone on the journey. If we achieve all these activities and we nail all these key results, what makes that work memorable and engaging? So this is the beginning of your design the t-shirt activity. You're trying to make a really engaging, memorable t-shirt worthy phrase. You could spend an hour on this, so I'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that. So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes to work on your OKR and to ask questions. So feel free just to keep working on it and put your questions in chat or just yell out. You can unmute. Yeah, leading indicators are a whole module in our training course. They're a bit more complicated. Basically, think of them as, if I had a key result that's a lagging indicator, something hard to measure, something I can't really measure every week, you may be able to come up with something that is predictive of that you can measure every week. So they're often more influenceable by a team. And generally speaking, it's something that the people involved with the work can measure or come up with. Yes, very good point, David. Iterating your OKRs rapidly with stakeholders and supporters is super important. Ideally, you want to go through multiple iterations of feedback and revisions as quickly as possible. So designing a process in your organization where you can iterate your OKRs quickly is super important. That's one of the reasons you have a Google Drive slide deck, is you can now share that with your group and iterate on it with comments and feedback immediately. It's a really quick way to get the feedback. Thanks for your question, David.
If only Google worked in China.
Any other questions? Anyone struggling with their key results? Because that can be hard to come up with a good measure. One tip with key results is start small. You might not have the data you're looking for. You might not be able to measure the outcome of your project. If so, think about, well, what could we begin to measure? I quite like to start with really simple things, like a 1-question survey. Could I do a 1-question survey to get at customer satisfaction? Could I, start measuring something in a very lightweight way that will get me on the journey of measuring customer behavior or sentiment or some kind of product outcome? Coming up to 1 minute left, so start finishing up your OKR. If you'd like some feedback on your OKR, feel free to share it with me. I'll provide my details later. I'm happy to have a look over your stuff, or you can share it in our Slack group, which I'll also share later. So if you're needing some sort of feedback on how your OKRs are written and whether they're good, yeah, just share that Google document with me and I can comment on it if you like. Very happy to have a look. Okay, any more struggles with this exercise? Did everyone get the canvas and did it work out okay? John, how's it going with yours? You're on mute.
That's all done on my side. So I've put in an objective, key results, well, a couple of key results and activities.
Nice. That's great. If we had more time, I'd ask people to share their OKRs. But I think we'll move on to some more content. And then if you want, we do have a whole training program if you want to get really into this. But yeah. It's worth noting this isn't the only way to to start with OKRs. You'll notice the last slide in the deck is a vision strategy piece. And if you read the comments on the vision and strategy piece, you'll see that one of the recommendations is actually you start with that, not with your current initiatives. So have a read of the notes in that last slide if you're interested in how strategy plays into OKRs, which is another mistake I made recently. Trying to write OKRs without the strategy is not fun. Okay, so I talked about 4 mistakes. You've actually written an OKR now. You've got my fantastic cheat sheet. You know what a good OKR looks like. You can separate outcomes from output. You're almost OKR superstars at this point. But what about adopting them? What are the key change management thoughts you might have about going into your organization and saying, hey, let's do OKRs? Well, one of the key techniques I think has been successful for my clients has been to really carefully, deliberately adopt OKRs incrementally. Basically, to take your time before you start to understand the why first before attempting to implement, and also to take it a slow team by team, area by area approach. Basically, you want to go broad and deep in an incremental way. You probably want your strategy and your company OKRs, which are breadth, and you want to pick 1, maybe 2 teams to go deep on to do your team level OKRs. Does that make sense? So it's not the whole company. It's like a broad stripe with your executive team and a thin stripe down a vertical towards the bottom until you've got through all the layers in your organization and looked at the OKRs at that level. So this requires you building up a picture of the why. How do you identify your why? The way I like to do it is to do an analysis of anecdotes and to get lots of interviews with leadership team, look at the engagement surveys you have, look at specific questions of engagement to strategy and purpose. I also like to create a specially designed survey to help clarify the role OKRs might play for a client. You can see one of my analyses of that behind me. Yeah, so you're basically looking to build a picture of why OKRs, why now, and to what end in our context, for this organization. As I mentioned earlier, you'll often see clusters of comments around things like alignment, perhaps around achievement, focus, or engagement. But figure out for your context why you're doing them, because this will obviously help you with all future efforts to teach, to introduce, to measure the impact and effectiveness of your OKRs. Another huge win I cannot recommend more is to create an OKR champions program. Basically, the first time I tried OKRs, I had 1,200 people and one of me, and I wanted to distribute the leadership of OKRs across more people than I could possibly touch. So the impact I could have as an individual person is very limited. So the role of a champion is basically a bit like an agile coach or a scrum master to enable and facilitate OKRs in their context, in their team or their department. In fact, at one client, the actual agile coaching team became the OKR champions, and that was actually quite a good fit. So to get your champions, first we asked for local volunteers. Importantly, volunteers from each department to sign up and learn more about OKRs, to support their teams and to help to run the process. To make the role a bit more attractive, we offered a special OKR Champions training program with an external trainer. Philippe Castro came in and taught us over in Germany, and I now offer that to my clients here in Australia. I also typically create a community of practice and a Slack support channel within an organization. So this community is a great way for asking questions and discussing the challenges with other teams and with other OKR practitioners. Feel free to join our OKR community at slack.freshwater.academy. You can post the OKR you wrote today to the OKR channel in that Slack group, and I'll give you feedback. And there's lots of graduates of our training program there, and lots of my clients are in there. So you can meet other organizations that are using OKRs on Slack. I'll send you that via email as well, so you have that. So at Scout, we started by providing online materials. We tried sending people a beginner's guide that Filippo Castro has on his website. And then we went on to develop an internal training workshop to teach everyone in the company what was an OKR. Since then, I've developed this into the Freshwater Academy OKR curriculum. And clients are often now asking me to come in and train their senior leaders in OKRs. I think this is a good complement to their leadership development program when you think about intent-based leadership, and looking at how OKRs can support leaders in their setting and delegating and facilitating their outcomes, while also encouraging autonomy and innovation. That's the kind of topic that I think is interesting for leaders. While I think leaders should be provided OKR training, I actually think teams should be provided training, as a very high priority. And this is where the OKR champions come in. They can, take a training program and deliver it to their teams. I've developed a train the trainer program. Basically, that's been a really helpful strategy for, again, scaling out OKRs across an organization. Train the trainer, they teach their teams OKRs, and they can adapt and make the OKR training their own and embed it in their existing onboarding programs for new starters. So that's been a super useful strategy for training. And finally, the classic change technique that I messed up recently. This would be a mistake number 5, I think, so far, if we were doing this talk recently, which is, don't forget you need to communicate about the OKRs. Just writing them down and not telling anyone is not going to help. So the basic technique is to over communicate the change and the OKRs themselves. Talk about them frequently, because talking about your OKRs frequently helps reinforce the purpose and the focus and the alignment. At Scout, we did this really well. We had an overview of OKRs at an all hands. 600 people turned up, biggest audience I'd ever spoken to at the time. And this was followed by regular updates. Here you can see Rich giving an update at a town hall. But my proudest moment, my success moment in my first OKR initiative was when the new CEO used OKRs to kick off a financial year. At this moment, it was 14 months after starting the journey, and I felt the company has just started being committed to OKRs, and they were just starting to use them to communicate their agenda. And that's the slide they used to do that. So we've covered a lot today. We talked about my 4 big boo-boos and what not to do and how to fix them. I've also given you 4 adoption techniques: the champions, the training, the community, and the communication. But there is quite a lot more to learn, it turns out. Things like the end-to-end OKR lifecycle, the 4 disciplines of execution is wonderful. Tooling is really interesting. OKR tools, there's a lot out there. Scheduling, how do you do the cycles? And then how do you plug it into your incentives programs, your leadership development, and your portfolio management systems? So often the question I get is, wow, that's a lot, Ben. Where do I get started? Can you make it a bit easier for me? Break it down really small steps. I recommend 4 things for you if you want to use OKRs from here. First one is practice. Second one is learn more. Third one is achieve them. And the 4th one is reflect on them. So the practice, just start. Use the canvas I emailed to you. Practice writing some more OKRs and getting feedback on them from people using the checklist and the template in the document. The next thing will be to learn more. Check out the OKR reading list. It's available as a free lesson if you sign up to the Freshwater Academy platform. I'll also send that to you via email in a few days. So you'll have a list of all my favorite books and favorite articles and favorite videos. That's coming to you in a few days. Then I think this is the critical bit that people often forget. Make OKRs part of your day-to-day routine, like an agile stand-up, a daily ritual. The discipline of a weekly OKR check-in brings the OKRs alive. It's the difference between doing them or not. And lastly, run a retrospective on your OKRs. Review, reflect, and celebrate every cycle deliberately to make them better the next time. Believe me, they're going to kind of suck the first time you do them, and that's okay. Everyone's first set of OKRs are terrible, and that's okay. You're going to learn through iteration. For extra credit, consider creating an OKR for your OKR adoption. Determine your why and measure your progress using OKRs. So one really quick way to get started is obviously through some kind of training. I'd love to hear from you if you're adopting OKRs right now in your team, or you might be interested in teaching OKRs to your clients or to your organization. Maybe you'd like to become an OKR champion in your organization. I basically have 2 trainings that you might be interested in. Leading Change is the 3 2-hour session for leading, setting, aligning, and achieving OKRs, suitable for teams or for leaders. It does have a bunch of leadership stuff in it. I've also got the Train the Trainer program that licenses you to teach using our videos and exercises. To get in touch, my email's there, or find me on LinkedIn. It's pretty easy to do these days. And so now we've got some time for questions, and I believe a draw of an Agile 2021 ticket. So a question for you, what are your tips for OKRs? What experiences have you had?
So I had one question, Ben. I was just thinking of OKRs, is that if one looks at the genealogy, probably feeding back into KPIs in the past and so on, is one hears some horror stories of what happened with the, I think there was the kill counts or whatever in the Vietnam War. And I think there was the law of unintended consequences with some of the prison things where they were doing drug testing and that sort of thing. And you had KPIs set up with respect to that. So are there any techniques that you can think of that could reduce the possibility that those unintended consequences are likely to come up depending on how the OKRs are set up?
Yeah, this is classic. If you read some of our materials, we talk a bit about in the training about this shift between MBOs and OKRs. Back in the day, Drucker was a bit sort of command and control. 1950s, 1954, OKRs can sometimes have this top-down command and control flavor, which really suffers from this thing called perverse incentives, where you get what you measure, and you definitely didn't want what you got. And I don't know if you remember Deming. He hated Drucker's MBOs. The difference between how we do OKRs now and how you do them really badly with these perverse incentives is who sets the targets and who owns the OKR. So if you think of OKR as more of a bottom-up thing that is owned by the team, not a top-down thing as a way to impose a target, you're on the right track. There's lots more information of that in the reading list that I'll send you. And that's a really important thing to note. So yeah, read Deming, compare it to Drucker. They have different philosophies on incentives. All the advice you'll get from me and other OKR people is do not tie bonuses or incentives or performance management or rewards to achieving a key result. That increases the perverse incentive. And also consider balancing out your key results with what are called health metrics, as in increase revenue, but don't piss off the customers while we do that. So we need two measures, a health metric of are the customers pissed off, and a revenue metric on are we making money, because we don't want to make money and then kill the thing. So that's why you might want to have multiple metrics. Some of them can be key results, some of them can be leading indicators, and some of them can be what are called health metrics, things that aren't changing. You just want to make sure you don't mess them up. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Great question. Are there any questions in chat? I think question from Michael. Have we applied OKRs in the scaled Agile framework? I was actually speaking to someone in New Zealand about using OKRs in SAFe. And to some extent, it's quite compatible. SAFe's quite a plan-driven approach, very Scrum-like, with a 3-month cadence planning increment. So you could very easily replace their existing value scoring mechanism, which is kind of a bit odd, with a fully fledged OKR system. And you'd already have the roles to do that. So if you are going to do SAFe, and good luck to you if you are, then that would be the place I would plug it in. And the second question from Young was about, this is more process, this is more work, we don't have time for this. I actually think that's a very important consideration and absolutely agree. I've discovered that OKRs are a lot of work, a lot of coordination cost, a lot of collaboration, a lot of iteration. It actually loads up your senior leaders with a lot of questions, like what do we really, really want? What are we doing? What does success look like? And while these are very important questions, if you don't have ready answers, then it's going to take a lot of time and effort to get them. So a big consideration for your change. That's why I say start with why. You have to have a reason to do OKRs, and it has to be more than the effort. The benefit has to outweigh the cost, and there will be a cost. So great point, Young. I think that's a really good suggestion.
Hi, can I ask a question? This is Chris here. Hello.
Hi.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay, great. Okay, I'd like to ask, because my organization is taking OKRs very seriously. They put in a lot of effort and time to do this OKR process over the different countries, different time zones in the global setup and all that. But what happens is a couple of months down the road, they just throw everything away. They go like, we're changing direction. So, and this doesn't happen just once, but a couple of times in the last few years. So yes, there is a lot of progress. We're getting close to what we want to get to, if everyone is clear what they want. But on the other hand, the amount of time, a lot of time is, I feel that it's invested on this, and it's very costly. People flying around and all that, so it's very costly. And throwing, I mean, how do I, as an Agile Coach Global, how do I bring it to the organization on the cost of all this thing that's happening? What methodology or what tool I can use to measure them, to bring it to them, to show them how important this is and what they're doing is, what is the impact it's having on the organization and the teams at the end of the day.
Yeah, so I mentioned this OKR for OKRs, and if you're interested, like, send me an email. I can send you my ones I've been using with real clients. Basically, what we're measuring is often the key attributes. Things like, are we achieving focus? You can measure that. Are we achieving actual key results? Are we achieving what we're setting out to achieve? Are we ambitious? Is there ambition in what we're setting? We can measure alignment. Are people aligning across functions, across silos? I think there's a fifth one. The point being that if you know why you're doing OKRs and you can come up with a key result for measuring the impact that you're having, then that can go a long way to deciding whether the effort is worth it. Because you'll be well aware of how much it's costing you in time and arguments and disagreements and cross-functional working, which is messy and time-consuming and frustrating. So you'll need a good change management program that has a good reason to be in order to balance that out, to Young's point earlier. Yeah, so there is lots of tools out there in terms of capturing them, measuring the results, but I think it's more the idea of having a clear understanding of what you're trying to achieve and a way of measuring that, which is basically the OKR for OKRs.
Thank you so much.
Wouldn't a big selling point be just looking at what's happened with Apple when Steve Jobs returned? Because you have a company that's going in all different directions and trying to produce a million different things with no focus. So all of a sudden he comes in there and says, right, we're going to get rid of all of that. We're going to focus on one key thing, the iPod, I think it was originally. And literally months away from bankruptcy is able to turn it into one of the most profitable companies in the world. And it seems that was because of OKRs, I would think. I mean, that's probably simplifying it too much.
Young mentioned a 4DX word, whirlwind, which is interesting. Yeah, good point. It's the enemy of achieving your OKRs, which is the day-to-day, the BAU, the day job gets in the way of your strategic initiatives. So some great content in the video. I'll send you a link to that, the 4DX video. Look in your email in a few days, you should have that. Yeah, some great stuff in there. Question about getting clarity on your why, defining OKRs and iterating away that. Right, so the participation question is a good one, the bottom-up participation. I've actually created a Google form so that if you're doing very big groups of people, everyone has a chance to contribute their suggestions for the objectives for a group, let's say a business unit or a company. So everyone can submit an objective suggestion, often done as part of a presentation or all hands. Here's what an OKR is. This is why we're asking you to participate. We want bottom-up input. And then you, like Christina Vodka says in her OKR workshop program, someone's job is to pull that together as a mirror or a mural. And then the leadership team can use the bottom-up participation and their top-down strategy, mush that together to come up with a genuinely participative, like, look at maybe a strategic OKR. And then at team level, a bit easier because the team comes up with the OKRs for themselves. So having the whole team involved being a really great way to do that. Yeah, so I think the participation point is very important. Thanks for that, Nick.
Cool. All right, so if there's no further questions, we can probably stop at that point.
Brilliant. It's been an absolute pleasure, and yeah, feel free to reply to my email. I respond to that. So yeah.
Thanks, man. That was really, really good, and it's a great insight into OKRs, and also a practical application that we can apply, and also lots of steps to make if we want to pursue that further.